time to pull up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. I am your host, JJ Wenner.
I'm Don Detweiler.
I'm Rob Mongol.
I'm Kit Vidalich.
And this is the Rider Dynasty podcast. Tonight on the show, we are discussing camp battles, players who are going to compete all year for targets. We'll weigh in on our favorites and help you decide which way to go. Now, before we get into tonight's topic, do me a favor, give us a follow on Twitter at RideOrDynasty and check out our website, rideordynasty.com, for all of our latest articles. Now, gentlemen, to kick us off, the NFL's COVID protocols for next season have been released. From daily testing to masking requirements and practice limits, unvaccinated players are facing much stricter rules than their teammates. Don, as my science guy, what are the key factors in making this decision at this point of the vaccination cycle that we're in?
Well, the big thing here is that people who are unvaccinated can still pick up this disease all over, anywhere, no matter what. And the bigger their sphere of influence with who they're interacting with, the larger their opportunity is, particularly in a camp situation where you're going to have 150 or so people per camp, including coaching and everything, coming together from all over the country, from all over the place in terms of different areas where there's hot spots or cold spots. It's a super risk to have all these people who might be unvaccinated with people who are vaccinated but could still vector the disease. So they're placing themselves at great risk.
Rob, do you think that this is a wise decision by the NFL in forcing players' hands?
Absolutely. I mean, safety first. I think the NFL has dropped the ball in some safety protocols early on. It took them a while to get around to the concussion issues, other health issues that affected players. And it seems like they're hitting this one right. You know, they're doing things right for once.
Kit, looking in the future, you have certain teams that are very, very behind the target for vaccinations that the NFL is shooting for. Such a team is the Buffalo Bills. Several of their stars have come out and said that they are not going to get vaccinated. Cole Beasley said some things on his Twitter page today. Didn't really make sense, but I mean, he was expressing his opinion. Are you going to take this into account, whether or not a player is vaccinated?
Great question. Probably not, to be frank. I mean, they obviously are at increased risk, and if there's a team, where we know that a large percentage are not vaccinated, that might affect that. So I guess if I had players ranked completely equally, I might make it the deciding factor. But in general, last year I didn't treat it as something. I mean, I guess there wasn't a vaccination option, but I didn't treat COVID as something that you could evaluate one player over another. And so I'm probably going to assume they don't get it and then just roll with the punches if they do. That being said, I feel like it is weird that many of them are being resistant to this.
From someone who hasn't looked too much into this beyond the headlines, how does it affect players that have the vaccine already but are exposed to someone who has it? Like, what's going on with Chris Paul right now?
Yeah,
he had to exit the playoff series even though he's vaccinated. That's something I'm not sure about. Maybe one of you guys can...
Now, I thought he tested positive.
He did, but he had been vaccinated.
Oh,
correct. So you still can test positive.
And is it because one of his teammates decided not to get vaccinated? I think is what Rob is getting at, right?
I missed that he tested positive. That's also news to me. I'm playing
You've
catch
been
up
busy.
here. Yeah.
You've been busy. So in the NFL, the rule is if you're exposed to COVID-19 and you're vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine. If you're unvaccinated and you're exposed, you do have to quarantine. There's some rules about like the cafeterias, saunas, how many people can be in the weight room if you're unvaccinated. And I'm wondering even more for free agents, the guys who have not yet signed. And I know there's going to be extra restrictions on free agents who aren't vaccinated as far as coming into camp and being able to work out for teams, that they're going to have to self-isolate for, I think, 5 days before they can meet with a team. So I wonder if it's almost, I know it's a business decision and that there's a lot of wariness about what they're putting into their bodies. But I wonder if the financial opportunities are going to dry up a little bit quicker if you're not willing to be vaccinated.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a team that's looking at bringing in a fringe roster guy, do you want to bring in a fringe roster guy that could potentially risk infecting your stars, or one that you feel more confident is not going to do that? I do think it's going to be something that teams consider, especially when you talk about guys that are, getting into training camp, really battling for those roster spots. So I tend to think that there will be a preference for those that chose to go with getting vaccinated and protecting themselves and their teammates.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
this is going to
Especially,
this is going to come up during the season too when you're trying to bring in free agent. If you need a guy this weekend and all the street free agents are all unvaccinated, you're out of luck.
and I also think teams are going to want to hit that threshold. I think it was 75%, which then releases them from a lot of obligations that they have to do, which will save them money. So I think the NFL is definitely forcing the players' hands on this. And I wonder if it's going to reach a more critical mass at some point this offseason. But I guess we will see what happens. Now, gentlemen, on to the main topic. As Don likes to say, hope springs eternal. Well, training camp is filled with the hope of all fans wishing for a breakout star to deliver the team to glory. Now, all breakouts must be preceded by law by either a mysterious quote from a coach or some glowing report from a beat reporter. Today, we are going to look at some of these battles and decide who we think will emerge from the fracas and forge our championship runs. Now, let's start with my new favorite team, the Carolina Panthers. Now, DJ Moore and CMC almost definitely will be the top two targets for the new QB, Sam Darnold. Competing for the third spot are Terrace Marshall and Robbie Anderson. Now, Terrace Marshall, 6'2", 6'3", 205, rookie out of LSU. Robbie Anderson, 6'3", 190, sixth-year player, signed in the offseason last year from the Jets. Kit, who's coming out on top, and who's going to be the number 3 receiver?
Yeah, so I actually decided I wanted to speak to this, and then I dove into some stats, and I got very confused, but I think it's an interesting thing to look at. If you look at the 3 receivers that Carolina had last year, and DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Curtis Samuel, all of them basically completely flipped their role. In 2019, Moore was a short to intermediate target guy. Last year, he was 21st in terms of average depth of target, much higher than they've ever been. Robbie Anderson was considered a field stretcher. He went from 8th in average depth of target down to 64th. And Samuel had previously maybe been incorrectly slotted as their deep threat and became kind of what I think of as appropriate for him for an intermediate area. All that is to say is there's going to be a lot of speculation in where you project Marshall and Anderson in terms of their roles in the offense. What I would say is I think the type of player that Terrace Marshall is and what he does to succeed is something that fits what the Carolina Panthers need. I do think to some extent DJ Moore is miscast as a deep threat. I like him as the great route runner, great run after catch, running back with the ball in his hands type of guy. And I think Robbie Anderson is someone who can complement that on the outside or seems to have now had some versatility in both ways. What it seems like they're missing, at least based on last year's production, is a big play receiver downfield who can dominate jump balls. And I'm hoping that Terrace Marshall can slot in as that third option. I can't say that with CMC and DJ Moore dominating, like you said, lots of the targets, that splitting with Anderson, he's necessarily going to have a very productive rookie season. But I'm looking towards something like 700 yards, maybe a decent amount of touchdowns, right? 7 or 8, establishing himself as somebody who proves he can be physically dominant as a downfield and end zone threat. And I really think that's something that offense needs right now. So
who ends up with more targets, Marshall or Anderson?
So I would guess that Anderson ends up with more targets. But I could see a world where Terrace Marshall ends up with more touchdowns and close to as many fantasy points, setting himself up to kind of completely overtake that role in his sophomore season.
Rob, do you agree?
I'm torn, but I tend to agree. I think Terrace Marshall and Robbie Anderson are both guys with unique skill sets. They're both tall. They're both fast. They both can operate relatively close to the line of scrimmage or get a little downfield. But Terrace Marshall can do everything Robbie Anderson can better. My big hangup is Robbie Anderson does have a history with Sam Darnold. He is more established in the NFL. He does understand the nuances that Terrace Marshall's definitely going to take some time to adjust to. I think Robbie Anderson wins that number 2. I guess not win, but he's going to be the second wide receiver on the team as far as targets are concerned early on. And Terrace Marshall gradually takes that from him. And the question is, for me, when is that going to happen? How early on in the season is it going to happen? If I had to pick, I think Terrace Marshall definitely finishes with more targets on the season, but it's not going to be by a whole lot. But if you look at the splits between the first half and the second half of the season, it will speak volumes as to what the future of both of the players are on the team, especially with Robbie Anderson, I believe, being a free agent this year or after this year.
That is correct. And so you both agree Terrace Marshall is definitely the direction that we think they're going to go. Maybe not immediately out of the box, but by the end of the season. Now, to keep this going with my actual favorite team, the real New York Jets, nobody knows how newly drafted QB Zach Wilson will perform, but the offense will be vastly better than last season. Now, Corey Davis has emerged as the clear wide receiver 1 so far, with the battle for targets between Elijah Moore and Denzel Mims. These players do not play the same position, but one is definitely going to emerge as the number 2 target for Wilson. Elijah Moore, 5'10", 178, just picked in the beginning of the second round. Rich Samini writes, Jets have been waiting 2 decades for wide receiver prospect like Elijah Moore. So there's the glowing reports. Denzel Mims at 6'3", 207. He was picked 59 last year. He was demoted to second string during this offseason behind Keelan Cole. He still has some believers with his 4.38 speed, his leaping ability. Don, who ends up with more targets?
This isn't close. Elijah Moore is going to end up with more targets for a couple of different reasons. He's the prototypical dynamic slot player, and the slot player is the rookie quarterback's best friend. In a land where tight ends are kind of fading back a little bit, the slot player has become that safety blanket and has become the land where you get your easy throws, your quick crossers, your little slants that are easily completable for the young quarterback. Moore has zero competition in the slot there. Mims has competition on the outside, and coming out of Baylor, where they don't really run a complete route tree, and Mims never ran a complete route tree there, he's strictly an outside guy and kind of a jump ball guy. Moore will get more targets, will get more catches, and therefore be the better fantasy player.
Fair enough. Kit, question for you. Does Mims beat out Cole?
You know what? I think that's up in the air right now. I think Cole had a surprisingly good season in a weird situation last year, or at least flashed. The reports early have been that the Jets like him. They like what he's been doing. I think there was even a report that they were looking to trade for him last year. And so, I don't know. I mean, early reports of Mims working behind him doesn't bode well, right? And so I'm a little loath to give up. I think I remember maybe it was a little later than this, but at one point people were fading Justin Jefferson because he couldn't beat BC Johnson out for the number 2 role. So I don't want to completely, sell Mims down the river quite yet. But to Don's point, he's going to have to show that he has skills that he maybe hasn't flashed before in order to establish himself in a role even over Keelan Cole.
And bear in mind, guys, we're going against air right now. Once the pads go on, this is going to be totally different. And Mims does give the Jets something that the rest of the offense doesn't give them, which is a jump ball guy, a dude with legit height and speed to go down the field. So different roles, different dudes. Cole's going to get his, but he'll probably be the 4th guy.
Don, I'm curious, what do you think about the reports that, again, it's training camp hype or mini camp hype, whatever it is, OTA hype at this point, that Moore, it could be a legitimate outside receiver. Obviously, his primary role being the slot, but I'm just curious what you think based on having scouted him and where you land there.
You know what? He is dynamic and really is a very good route runner. The question is just going to be whether or not he's able to beat press coverage, which you will definitely see outside. If it turns out that his quickness allows him to do that, then at 5'10", we've seen loads of outside 5'10" wide receivers that can be very effective. If he's good enough to win at the line of scrimmage, then yeah, he can do it.
I think word on the beat either came out today or yesterday is that they love Elijah Moore in the slot and that they have actually moved Jamison Crowder out to that Y position, which I think is interesting. So they've got basically 2 slot receivers flanking, Corey Davis out there. And ultimately where one of those ends up, I think is irrelevant. I mean, if that's going to be the 2 and the 3, they're going to be pretty interchangeable on the team.
Yeah, and from the NFL level, their perspective, there's a lot of ways you can work around that. Bunch formations work great for that. You can get 2 guys off the line of scrimmage relatively easy, just running those kind of muddle packages. So there's ways to utilize those fast guys. It all comes down to whether or not Wilson can deliver the ball.
Well, if there was ever a team who loves slot receivers, let's travel about 4 hours up 95 to the hated New England Patriots. Who is going to emerge this year as the top target of the palindrome QB battle? Huh? Cam versus Mac? Huh?
English teacher.
Sorry. Jacoby Myers or Nelson Aguilar. Now, Myers is the 6'2 slot from North Carolina State who led the team in receiving last year. Jacoby Myers continues to pop. He had some nice practices with some solid catches. At this point, I wonder if he turns out to be the Patriots wide receiver 1. That was a quote from the Providence Journal's Mark Daniels. Now, Aguilar, who was run out of Philly because of his hands, is now the darling of the devil. Belichick said he's got a lot of position flexibility and good skill and talent. He's doing well. Good to work with him. Rob, who emerges as the wide receiver 1 getting the most targets on this team?
I think this is going to be an interesting battle. Nelson Aguilar got ran out of Philly for his hands, but then he went to Oakland and played a very different role, played a bit further downfield, operated as a deep threat, and I think exceeded expectations, everyone's expectations in that role. Whereas Jacoby Myers operates a lot closer to the line of scrimmage, is the slot guy. He played about half his snaps from the slot last year. The question for me is, when does Mac Jones take over the reins as a quarterback here? I think Mac is certainly going to be, like Don said earlier, young quarterbacks love tight ends and slot receivers. I think Mac Jones will look Jacoby Myers' way early and often, and he will lead the team in receptions if Mac Jones takes over the starting role earlier on. If Cam manages to hang on to the starting role the entire season, I think that role's reversed. Whereas Jacoby Myers might get a few more targets, but Nelson Aguilar is going to lead the team in receiving yards and touchdowns and going to be more fantasy relevant for you.
So, Rob, you're leaning Aguilar then?
I think he's going to produce more fantasy points this season, but Jacoby will have more receptions. So yes, I guess I'm leaning Aguilar here.
Oh.
It's rough. It's tight.
Yeah, you're not really giving a good, clear answer on this one, buddy.
Aguilar, more fantasy points. Give me him.
Well, it sounds like you said it's dependent on when Mac comes in, right?
If Mac comes in, if it's not Stidham. Don, where are you at with Aguilar and Jacoby Myers?
Well, you guys are absolutely right. It does depend on the quarterback because Cam doesn't like to throw the short routes. He's always been a down-the-field guy. Think about the dudes who you made money for, like Devin Futchness, who could run exactly one route, and it was go. So in this circumstance here where Jacoby Myers has been historically operating closer to the line of scrimmage, I see him as kind of more suffering under Cam, and then probably, as we said, with Zach Wilson, doing better with Mac. So the question is if and when the transition happens. That said, the wide receiver talent out there is interesting, and Aguilar has done a fabulous job of reinventing himself after the debacle in Philadelphia. Darth Hoodie has always tended to lean towards veteran players. I'm going with Aguilar here because I think he's going to be more polished, more ready, and more capable of picking up the offense faster.
Myers already has the offense. Myers is the right choice. Sorry, you guys both whiffed on that one. Kit, you're with me on this, right?
Oh, most definitely. I think it.
There you go,
I think
buddy.
it's Myers. Let's do it.
All right, yeah, we're riding with Jacoby. Don't come at me with any Gunnar Olszewski either. Jacoby Myers is the way
don't
to
worry.
go. Now that we visited the penthouse up in New England, let's check out the outhouse down in Jacksonville. New head coach Urban Meyer has made a case for bringing in his type of players. Showed that by signing Tim Tebow at tight end, presumably because Aaron Hernandez wasn't available. Trevor Lawrence will have decent weapons at his disposal, but who's going to emerge as the top target in this offense? Now, we have DJ Chark, we have Laviska, we have Travis Etienne. Urban Meyer has had something to say about all these guys. For Chark, I just didn't like his size, his strength. I just thought it was way below average, way below what we expect from our receivers. He was told that, and the best thing about DJ is he addressed it and hit it very hard. About Laviska, he's a guy that's right in the right position at that age gap. I love who he is. I love the way he practices. He's been there every day. And Chenault, the Jaguars, when you look at statistically, big plays were very hard to find last year. And this guy's got big play written all over it. Sorry, that was about Etienne. So, Don, Viska, Chark, Etienne. Who's the number one receiver?
Wow, that's a mixed bag of crazy right there. So evidently Chark addressed his lack of overall size by growing in the offseason. Yeah, that's neat. I wonder how he accomplished that. Was he on the rack?
Well,
good
down
Lord.
in Florida, they have a lot of things that help you grow.
He went and hung out with Florida Man or something.
Barry Bonds.
Craziness. The shenanigans here is interesting, and I'm just hoping that show doesn't ruin what would be a very interesting quarterback. But there are weapons there for sure. Chark historically has gotten it done, but it certainly sounds from those quotes available that they are leaning more towards Laviska and Etienne. Now, it's worth noting that Etienne is the only guy that of the three that Urban Meyer brought in of his own accord, investing the 25th overall pick in a dude who's, he's a kind of running back, I guess. We'll just call him a weapon because that's realistically what they're going to use him as. And in that college-y type offense, Etienne is definitely the guy to take of the three here, and the reason for that is familiarity. Lawrence knows him. He went to college with him. These guys are buddies. They know exactly where the one is going to be and where the other is looking to get the ball. So for no other reason than for this year, dealing with a rookie quarterback with a familiar face, I'm going to go with Etienne. Of the two wide receivers, however, I'd rather have Laviska. He fits the age profile, would cost you less realistically if you were trying to acquire, and the deal on him has always been that he is big play written on him waiting to happen.
Now, Rob, follow up for you. Where does Marvin Jones fit into this? Over the past 5 seasons, he has averaged about, 7 targets a game? Even if that drops to 5, we're talking about 70, 80 targets this season, right?
He's quietly produced solid wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 numbers for the past couple of years here. And personally, I think it's going to be Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones. I think, Urban Meyer has kind of discussed his disdain for DJ Chark. DJ Chark responded by bulking up a little bit and trying to be the kind of player Urban Meyer wants. But, I'm with Don here. I think Urban Meyer's running a circus down here. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in any of his statements or what he's doing. They're quote-unquote haven't made a decision on who's going to start week 1 yet. As if we're going to see more Gardner Minshew this year. So I think Marvin...
So, are we confident in saying that Urban Meyer is the worst coach in the NFL right now that Gase is?
So I was going to... Possibly. But I was going to say, I wonder if, despite all this talk, that it actually ends up resembling a much more traditional offense than you think. I think that he weirdly hired old school coordinators who have done the NFL thing for a long time and are kind of boring. I could see them just having Chark be the only normal receiver, right? Marvin Jones, I guess counts for that too. But I don't know. I do think that Urban will get gimmicky, but if it doesn't work for a couple games, maybe he defers back to his, old school NFL guys, and Lawrence just says, all right, I'm going to chuck it up to the big fast dude 30 yards downfield. So I guess, compared to the other two opinions, I'm a little more ambiguous as to between Viska and Chark, who's going to really be the most viable fantasy option, I would say.
I don't think it's even, I think it's Laviska night and day. I think DJ Chark might be looking at the wide receiver 3 here if he doesn't have a good camp. And, I'm almost just completely out on DJ Chark. I was looking at his numbers. I think DJ Chark is living off of fantasy memories in our head, and he's not really done it for 2 years now. In the last 2 seasons, I mean, one, he struggled with some injuries, but in the last 2 seasons that he's played, he's put up 4 wide receiver 1 weeks. Wide receiver 1 being top 12, not the wide receiver 1. And other than that, he's been borderline unstartable, frequently leaves games with injuries. And, coming into the 2020 season, I thought that was a label I was going to put on Laviska, a guy who's frequently injured, maybe someone you can't rely upon is, but I think Urban Meyer is trying his hardest to make Laviska the X and move him out of this gadget role. He's forcing Etienne into that gadget role closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think it's going to be Laviska and Marvin Jones running the X and the Y this year, with Etienne with a big roll out of the backfield and occasionally flexed out, and DJ Chark filling in the gaps.
Your reasoning is sound. I don't know if I can argue that.
I'm in a New York state of mind, so let's go back to the Meadowlands and check out the Giants. Now, the G-men hired a new wide receiver 1 in Kenny G, leaving the rest of the pack to fight it out for scraps. We have Kadarius Toney facing off against Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard. Now, Toney was drafted in the first round, but has missed time in camp, skipping the voluntary portion. Slayton is only 24, and last year led the team in yards and tied for TDs. Shepard is the perennial breakout candidate. It's always going to happen for him this year. But after leading the team in receptions last year, maybe this is finally that year. So which direction are we going, Kit?
So this is my team. I'm a Giants fan, and I can't help but just be excited with adding Toney and Galladay and what that means for the offense overall, and hopefully the development of Daniel Jones. That being said, of the 3, Toney, Shep, and Slayton, I don't want to rely on any of them as a regular fantasy starter. I think there's going to be a lot of mix and matching. I'm sure there's weeks where Shepard will have 8 for 92, and that'll be a viable week. I'm sure Slayton will catch a touchdown on a deep ball once in a while. And I know they're going to game plan for Toney, right, to get him the ball. But he's already kind of leaned into this this concern that the Dynasty community has of him being, gadgety and I mean, unreliable. Maybe it's weird to say that, him not showing up because of a voluntary workout is unreliable, but that was already kind of the MO on him almost, right? That he took him 4 years to actually do anything productive in college. And so I'm hopeful for what they can do for Daniel Jones, what they can open up for Galladay, right, in terms of taking opportunities away. And so I'm not trying to cop out. If I needed a wide receiver 3, I'd probably just take Shep. If I needed a long-term dynasty asset, I'm still buying into Toney's athleticism and dynamism. I mean, I don't think there's a good percentage chance that he hits and becomes, one of those really fun guys. I think he could be someone who's always tantalizing and never gets there. But, if you're looking at a long-term asset, especially the fact that, he went 20th, and if you look at a lot of rookie drafts, I do Superflex exclusively, he's going 210 behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, who went in the 4th round, and maybe for good reason. But I think that to some extent, as dynasty players, we have to overcome our ego and say, okay, the NFL might know something about this, right? Urban Meyer was like, dang, I wish I had him, which we just spent some time shitting on Urban Meyer. But some NFL coaches think he had value to their team. So kind of a cop out, but I wouldn't want to be relying on any of them to try to contend this year. Let me say that.
And you're right. Just Toney he's kind of reinforcing all the negative stereotypes people had about him, right? I think his last practice, he couldn't keep his footing, and he was complaining about his cleats, and he ended practice early to go get new cleats, and never came back out. Day before, he was a little injured. It doesn't look like he's really ingratiating himself, but I have to agree with you, Kit. My main question here is how many passing attempts are we talking about, right? Evan Ingram still is there. He got 100 targets last year. Saquon's back. He's going to get 80 targets. And then you have Kenny G, who's getting, 120, 140?
140.
You better hope.
I mean, they only attempted 550 attempts last year, right? You got to think 40 sacks. That right? Everything starts coming off that number really fast. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Tony, Darius, or Sterling Shepard to really step up into a weekly producing role here.
Definitely.
Don?
I absolutely agree with you. I don't see a great fantasy future for any of the three of them. I think Tony's going to be used all over the place. He's definitely going to see time in the kicking game if he's on the field. So it's one of those deals where, yeah, he's going to get his gadget plays, but a lot of them are going to be non-scorable gadget plays. So it's very interesting how the application of these players is going to come down. Yeah, JJ and Kit, you both said it. Shep is, we're still waiting. Probably never going to happen. And Slayton he's going to be that guy that drives you nuts. He'll be great for 2 weeks here and then disappear and then be great again and then disappear.
A best ball player.
Absolutely. Bench guy, he's a great fifth receiver to have on your team. Like, if you get in a pinch or you get any injury problems, he'd be a great guy to have as a reserve. But none of these guys I want to hinge my season on.
All right, gentlemen. So those were the main five I wanted to get to. You guys came up with a whole bunch of others, so we're going to do a little bit of a speed round here. I'm looking for 30-second answers. Don, Kit, I know that might be hard for you, but 30 seconds or less.
I can't promise anything.
All right, here we go.
Can we put a clock on him like they do with Giannis?
Oh,
the free throw clock here.
Definitely. Just so you know, I'm going to ask a question. I'll give you the competitors. You choose the winner. And away we go. They say you got to pay for what you break. I'm going back to Kansas City. Will there be a viable wide receiver 2 in Kansas City this season or ever? Pringle versus Robinson versus Hardman versus, oh, Jesus Christ, Noah Gray.
No, there won't. Never going to happen. As long as the tight end is still there, as long as Hill is still there, not going to happen. Just won't.
All right.
Look at that.
All around the campfire, and everybody is high, high, high. Rob, in Denver, can Teddy B or Locke sustain an offense that supports 3 legitimate fantasy starters? If no, which of these 3 fail? Judy, Sutton, or Fant?
Fant fails here. I don't think either of them can support a third weapon. And Noah Fant's a great weapon in his own right, but he's not the receiver that Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton are. And they're going to get force-fed the ball, and Fant is going to be a distant third and a guy you don't even want to stream.
Wrong. Only because I have a share of Fant. That's wrong. All right. The autumn wind may be a Raider, but there are plenty of vacated targets available in the desert. Do either of the erstwhile hot rookies capture them? Henry Ruggs or Brian Edwards? Done.
Of the two, I want Ruggs. He's got the pedigree, and he's definitely got the wheels to do it. Edwards showed us a grand total of nothing last year, so of the remaining, I'll take Ruggs.
You can't go west, you can't go east. I'm stuck in Indianapolis with the fuel pump. That's deceased. What in the holy hell is happening out wide for the Colts? Who will be the top 2 targets for Wentz this season? Michael Pittman versus Paris Campbell versus the ghost of T.Y. Hilton? And I'm going to throw in Zach Pascal.
I will take Michael Pittman here. I don't think anyone else is going to be fantasy relevant apart from Paris Campbell, maybe, if he stays healthy. And if Paris isn't healthy, then T.Y. Hilton. Give me Michael Pittman all day. I think we started to see a breakout at the end of the year, and it continues with a new quarterback, and you know, he's going to be the deep target, the X receiver there.
So like in Best in Show, you said that's the order. Pittman, Campbell, Hilton, Zach Pascal.
Yes.
Very good. Well, You can't roller skate in a buffalo herd, but you can be happy if you put a mind to. Kit, the newly high-octane passing attack has blossomed with the addition of Stephon Diggs. Big question for all Dynasty managers. Who will be second in targets behind Stephon? Gabriel Davis versus Sanders versus the COVID darling himself, Cole Beasley.
Speaking of breaking out at the end of the year, looked it up. Gabe Davis played 83% plus of snaps from week 12 on until he got injured in week 17 and for the playoffs. I don't think the addition of a Sanders necessarily is good for Davis's target share, but they play fundamentally different roles. I think this is just a speed bump for Davis in regards to what his career trajectory is. He really impressed me in terms of what he flashed last year. I feel like the Bills are in on him. If anything, Sanders might draw some coverage away from him. And while he might not have, a huge year next year, it'll be a step toward being a very viable fantasy receiver and dynasty player long term.
Rob and Don, does Sanders replace Beasley?
I think Beasley still gets his. Sanders is the third, and I love Gabe Davis, but I don't think he produces this year.
Oh, you don't think Gabe Davis produces?
I'll wait till after we can argue.
Okay. Interesting. I disagree with you, but that's interesting. All right, gentlemen, it's time for final thoughts. Let the riders know where they can find you and anything that you want to say about any of the players we talked about tonight. Kit, you are up first.
Yeah, you can find me at Kit Vitalich, Dynasty FF. And I would say that playing Dynasty for 3 years, tell myself every year, camp hype isn't anything you need to worry about. Don't focus on it. Make yourself ignore it. And I have a draft coming up next week, and I cannot wait to draft Elijah Moore because he's going to the Hall of Fame. So try to be better than me.
Your mouth, God's ears. Rob, you're up next.
You can find me on Reddit and Twitter at @RoDoRob. And exactly like Kit said, be careful with the camp hype right now. Out of Buffalo, Isaiah Hodgins is getting hyped up. He's the wide receiver 6 on the team. Maybe he has a role in 2022, but you got to take everything with a grain of salt.
Well, I definitely like pink Himalayan salt, so if that's the grain, I'll take it. Don, you're up.
Gotta love this time of year when everybody looks great because they're throwing against air and they're competing against dudes in shorts. Wait for the pads to come on and wait for the real beat reporters to get you the real intel here before you start making grand trades here and huge aspirations, because right now they better look good, because if not, they're getting cut.
Yes. I'm at JJ Wenher on Twitter. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Kit and Rob, for joining us tonight. Thank you to all the writers out there for listening. From all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, and remember, never say anything to make a meeting longer or cut a happy hour short. Boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.